This is my 34th video on my work with OO gauge. See part 1 of this series for my reasons for getting into OO gauge when I already had a lot invested in working in N gauge and I didn't really have space available for a large, fully operational OO gauge layout. Also see my lengthy series on my N gauge railway modelling for smaller and more complex scenery and smaller scale trains running. This part is the 8th dealing with my third layout, made using mainly Hornby EZ Track. See the prior video, part 27, for my reasons for wanting to try a Hornby EZ Track layout when I already had an OO gauge layout using Bachmann EZ Track. This part deals with further work on my Hornby layout, specifically installing the Hornby electrically operated turntable to its permanent position on the layout, with roadbed for the feeder tracks and landscaping the yard area around the turntable. See my prior video, part 30 in this series, for my initial unboxing of the Hornby turntable, which was supposed to be new but turned out to be used, and my initial attempts to get it working on a temporary testing basis. This was where I got to at the end of my last video. Other than the area with the turntable, the track was all pinned down over either cork or rapido roadbed, ballasted and weathered. Now, with the rest of the track essentially complete, it was time to install the turntable. I got the turntable in place back on the board, then the first thing that needed to be done was wiring for the motor that turns the turntable. I believe these wires are supposed to come from Hornby with plugs on the end, but mine just came with short lengths of wire with bare ends. I would probably have needed to extend the wires in any case. Now that I was installing the turntable basically permanently, I wanted to solder the wire connections, so I brought my soldering station up from the workshop bench and soldered the wires from the turntable to my longer wires leading to the transformer and switch. You can see the wires that I soldered protruding from beneath the board at top right here. I got the turntable connected up to a transformer supplying 12 volts DC, with the Hornby switch that came with the turntable wired into one of the connections, and then of course I tested the turntable to make sure that it rotated properly when the switch was set. Here's a view of the turntable in its intended position seen from above. The wires go through a hole in the board next to the little house at the bottom of this picture. Now I wanted to get roadbed under the various feeder and parking tracks, and then to texture the yard area around the table in some sort of matching way. I used the same rapido noise killer mainline roadbed that I'd employed for the rest of my track, except for the junction areas where I used cork. I marked the position of the tracks with a black marker, then removed the tracks by unclipping them from the turntable and cut pieces of roadbed to fit. The roadbed was then glued down using Woodland Scenic's foam tack glue, which is specifically designed for this application and really works very well for it, gripping the foam very quickly so long as the glue is spread thinly and evenly over the contact area on the board. Then push pins were used to make sure the roadbed didn't shift as the glue was setting more thoroughly. I got roadbed under all of the tracks, bending it to the curves as best as I could and bringing it right up to the edges of the turntable. Since the tracks slope upward to the turntable, the Hornby instructions themselves suggest doubling the roadbed for the 2 inches closest to the turntable. Now I assumed they would be referring to Hornby roadbed, but I checked the height of the turntable above the board where the tracks join, and it was 7 mm, exactly twice the thickness of the noise killer mainline roadbed at 3.5 mm. So 2 thicknesses seemed exactly right, and I cut 2-inch pieces for the roadbed for each track. Then I glued these 2-inch pieces on top of the first layer of roadbed up against the turntable. I did find that the foam tack glue wasn't as good for gluing roadbed to roadbed as it was for gluing roadbed to the board. Still, there's not really going to be anything trying to shift these short pieces of roadbed very much. One thing that the Hornby instructions didn't mention is that the connector tracks for the turntable have 2 little legs under them to assist in raising them up to the correct level. If you're going to put roadbed under those tracks, you're going to need to either remove those little legs or to drill holes through the roadbed to accommodate them. I went for drilling holes as it seemed this would produce a more robust arrangement, supporting the tracks more firmly and also holding the roadbed itself in place positively. So, now I had all of the turntable tracks in place with roadbed and doubled roadbed on the ends up to the turntable itself. At this point, I tested again to see if the tracks would still work. The main problem I had with the turntable was getting it to reliably feed power to the parking tracks. I was pleased to find that the feeding of power to the tracks actually seemed to work better with the tracks fixed down like this. Not to say that there weren't still some hiccups, but generally the tracks seemed to get power better than before when I was testing. Perhaps the roadbed pushing up on the tracks sort of created a seesaw effect, pivoting on the clips and pushing the inner ends of the tracks down somewhat so that they made better contact with the little contacts on the end of the rotating arm. Now that I had the turntable and its associated tracks in place with roadbed, I wanted to improve the look of the yard by texturing it. I thought I would do this by gluing fine cinders all over the yard, but I didn't want to get any into the mechanism of the turntable, so I masked it with paper and masking tape. Then I painted diluted glue all over the yard and sprinkled on fine cinders by tapping a tea strainer full of cinders gently above the area. I did one section at a time so as to apply the cinders when the glue was still nice and wet. Here are my basic materials: a yogurt container with diluted white glue, a large brush to cover areas and a small brush to get into corners and tight places, and a paper towel for cleanup. I bought a large jug of school glue from Amazon as I was fed up running out of white glue. I diluted this 1 part glue to 2 parts water, as the Amazon glue is quite thick. I found at first that the glue tended to bead rather than spread evenly on the board, but a squirt of dish detergent in the mix solved that problem, so then it became possible to quickly paint a thin, fairly even layer of glue onto an area. I've found before that the best way to sprinkle fine flock or similar material evenly on an area is to put the material into a fine strainer and then gently move the strainer over the area to be covered, tapping it as you move it. This causes the cinders, in this case, to drift down and cover the area quite evenly. Here you can see the whole area covered with cinders. There are some cinders where there shouldn't be any, but those will vacuum off easily where there's no glue to hold them. Here's another view of the area after this first application. You can see that the glue is still quite wet. I was a bit worried about whether all of the spreading of glue etc. on the board might cause a problem with the MDF, which is notoriously not very good with moisture, but I had painted the MDF before starting on any of the track work etc., and I didn't see any problems with applying the wet materials. This is the Amazon glue that I used. That should last me a while. I did consider possibly using the Express Scale Fine Dark Stone Aggregate for the yard, but I decided to go with the Woodland Scenics Fine Cinder Ballast. When the glue had dried overnight, I went over the area with a small vacuum cleaner. I was a bit nervous as to how much of the cinders would actually stay glued down. The result wasn't too bad. Some areas did come up bald, presumably because I didn't get enough glue there or the glue had started to dry out too much before I got the cinders on. But basically most of the area was covered quite well. I touched up bald spots by dabbing on more of the glue mix with a small brush and then applying some more cinders with a small spoon. Of course, then I had to let those bald spot touch-ups dry before vacuuming again. I see in this picture that there are still some bald spots that I missed, so I'll have to have one more go at touching up. But basically the yard area is filled in now, and I'm fairly happy with how the cinders blend in with the turntable and the access tracks with roadbed. I didn't ballast these tracks, and I don't intend to. I think they look okay as a yard area like this. Now let's see some video of my somewhat problematical retesting of the turntable after all this. Okay, well, let's see if the turntable works now. If I turn the power off, probably. Okay. So we'll run the little plug. Oh, famous last words. He's not even getting across the blithering. He's not even getting across the point there. Whoops. Is he on the track? Oh, yeah. just doesn't seem to be working well. Okay, let's try and see if we can get this turntable to work. If I can get my loco to work. I don't know. Well, I just don't seem to be getting the loco to work at all anymore. Which is weird because it was working. No, but the loco, it's just not working at all anymore. Well, I don't know. I don't know what the heck's going on here. It's like we're not getting any connection there. Nope, I'm not getting anything. Okay, I just took the little pug downstairs and cleaned his wheels in an attempt to make sure that it's not his wheels causing problems. Which, you know, with all the dirt around, you never know. So we'll try. I've got no buffers on the ends of some of these tracks, so I've got to be careful I don't run him off. I know it doesn't like it if you don't get the engine near the middle of the table. I get so confused which way I'm going all the time on this turntable. Seems a bit iffy, doesn't it? But we got onto it and off it. And now he's decided he doesn't want to go on the turntable. Let's see if we can find a poking stick here. I don't know. I mean, yes, it's these poor contacts there that are causing the problem, I think. That's where the contact from the main line comes in, and that's not contacting as well as it might. And if you don't contact that, you've got no contact. You've got no power for engines anywhere on the turntable. I don't know. I don't know. This whole business of this turntable is pretty much a dubious exercise at best. No, I cannot get that to move now. The problem with a turntable is there's so many places power has to get passed, and it might be iffy. You know, you can have a problem if that point doesn't pass power, you won't get anything. If the connection from the main line to the turntable there doesn't pass power, you won't get anything. If the connection from the arm to the individual track doesn't work, you won't get anything. See, now that moved a bit, and then it got stuck on the, it went to the, oh, blimey. Whoops. Well, that was, what can you do? Well, he's totally derailed now, right? So, frankly, trying to get this turntable to work is such a dubious exercise, you wonder whether it's worth it at all, really. Well, of course it's harder when you're filming, because when you're filming it's harder for you to get it if you poke it. You know, bits of it, it's like the curate's egg, it's good in parts, bits of it work some of the time. Doesn't look too bad. Didn't sound too hopeful, did it? It got on and off, though. It got on and off. So, quite frequently, a degree of poking is required to get an engine to work on it, but sometimes you can get it to work up to a point. Seems to turn okay, mine. It's just getting the engines to run on it that's a problem. And it doesn't look too bad now. I think that's about as good as we're going to get it. I'm just going to have to be resigned to the fact that it needs a bit of poking occasionally to actually make an engine work on it.